Welcome to ILTV's Insider. I'm Aaron Porras, and today we are covering a topic that occupies some serious space in Israeli discourse. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the 3 corruption cases against him. Specifically, though, we'll mostly be discussing Case 4000, or the so-called Bezek affair, which is largely said to be the most serious case that Netanyahu faces. Now, the Bezek affair, in short, alleges that Netanyahu entered into a quid pro quo agreement with former controlling stakeholder of the Bezek telecommunications company, Shaul Elevich. And as part of that supposed agreement, Elevich's news company, Walla, was tasked with giving positive spin for the prime minister in addition to negative coverage on his detractors. In return, Netanyahu is accused of pushing legislation favorable to Elevich and his Bezekcom company. Now, the first star witness to take the stand, Fmr Walla CEO Ilan Yeshua, who says that he was routinely pressured by Netanyahu's inner circle, as well as Elevich himself, to break journalistic integrity and to even destroy evidence of this conspiracy. Netanyahu, on the other hand, maintaining his innocence and accusing the justice system of fabricating the charges in order to oust him from office undemocratically.
הפרקליטות פתחה בחקירות נגד ראש ממשלה בישראל בניגוד לחוק. לא סתם חוק. חוק יסוד שמחייב קבלת אישור לפתיחת חקירה על ידי היועץ המשפטי לממשלה, אישור שמעולם לא ניתן. ולמה הם עשו את זה? כי הם במסע ציד. הם לא חקרו עבירה, הם לא חיפשו עבירה, הם חיפשו אדם, הם חיפשו אותי. כך מנסים להפיל ראש ממשלה חזק מהימין. כך נראה ניסיון הפיכה שלטונית.
Joining us to discuss is Israeli journalist and attorney Ben-Dror Yemini and Professor Avi Bell, Faculty of Law at both Bar-Ilan University and the University of San Diego. Thank you both so much for joining us. Now, Professor, I'll start with you. Netanyahu, as we just heard, still maintains that the indictments themselves were brought against him outside the bounds of normal order of operations, and that in itself is proof of political motivations. What do you say?
Well, he's right. The court has already ruled this. One of the things that it says in the basic law is that it's the Attorney General must approve any investigation into any criminal investigation of the Prime Minister. It's well understood in the case law that this must be in writing. Apparently, there was no such writing. The attorneys for Netanyahu brought a motion to dismiss the charges on that basis, and the court ruled that the Attorney General had broken the law. It should have been in writing. There is no such writing. And then they said, well, no, don't do this again. Right? That is, it's a remarkable ruling because the case law does say that in the absence of a written approval, charges should be dismissed. There are prominent cases that have ruled that, and this court just ignored them.
All right, Ben-Dror, let's turn to you. How do you respond to the professor, and do you agree with the court's overturning of that law?
I'm not sure that I agree with the court. I'm not sure that I agree with the whole process at all. I have a problem. I have a problem because both, I think, first of all, that I'm not speaking about legal proceedings, and Professor Bell is right. He is right. I'm speaking about the bigger picture. I'm trying to zoom out. And when I'm zooming out, what I see is 2 things. Well, first, I don't think that, generally speaking, that the way Netanyahu behaved is the way that I want my prime minister to behave. I don't like the present that he received. I don't like the pressure that was exercised in Walla website, which in that time was highly important. And I don't like a lot of other things. I don't even like his negotiation with my publisher, Anonymous. I wrote it in Yediot Ahronot, which is the newspaper of Mr. Moses. But I really don't like the whole process coming from the prosecution, the general prosecutor. Now, yes, I know I'm somehow in between. What I'm trying to say is Netanyahu has very good claims against the general prosecution from one hand, and from the other hand, they have some good claims against him. I don't think that he behaved rightly, one. I don't like him to be my prime minister, second. But I'm not sure at all that what they show is criminal. If we have time, I can give you one example.
Sure.
Until now, I mean, we are only in the first week of the process, and what they showed us is again and again that a lot of pressure was exercised in order to change a lot of articles and titles and so on in favor of Netanyahu in order to receive something in return. Now, the moment that the defense will begin the argument, they will say, look, let's go and check what happened in Walla website. And you know what they are going to find out? I have a surprise for you. That generally speaking, Walla website was most time against Netanyahu and not in favor of Netanyahu. So maybe the whole story of pressure, it's a kind of game that produced almost zero. So, and in the bigger picture, you will find out that whatever was allegedly given in return to Mr. Alovich was confirmed by all the legal experts, and only the final signature was of Netanyahu. I'm just giving you an example because I do remember my days as a lawyer. So what we see now is only the beginning. It's not the bigger picture, and we have a lot in front of us in order to understand what is going to happen.
So back to you, Professor Bell. I mean, what we are basically hearing then is that the prosecution is in favor of the ends justifying the means, and that this is all going to be thrown out. So, you know, what are we as the public supposed to make of this?
I'm sorry to say this, but I think this is ultimately just a show trial. That is, there's a reason why there's a trial that's scheduled to have 300 witnesses, where it's not really the facts that are being disputed. It's really the law that's being disputed. And the reason is to produce lots of information to reconfirm those who have the opinion of Ben-Dror that this is really not a good man that's serving as prime minister. This is not a trial that's designed to get to proving a crime, because there's no crime there. There's no crime in putting a lot of pressure on editorial boards to approve more flattering stories. There's no crime in seeking positive coverage from a media outlet. And there's no crime in adding his signature, the prime minister adding his signature as either as prime minister or as minister of communications to routine approvals of corporate reorganizations. And that's what was discussed here. It's not about legislation. It was about routine approvals of corporate reorganizations that were gone over by the professional staff of the communications ministry. So there's ultimately no crime at the bottom of this. And the whole point of the trial is to cast lots and lots of dirt in the air and see what sticks.
Well, so more to your point, could you maybe expand on some of the evidence that the prosecution says that they're going to bring forward? Because, I mean, if you're saying that there are 300 witnesses, and I don't even know how large of a body of supposed physical evidence that they're supposed to bring, how much of it is circumstantial or hearsay versus truly substantial or objectively, showing a gray area or even illegality?
Well, I don't think that, again, as I said, I don't think that any of this proves a crime. But let's understand that the prosecution has put itself in a tight spot. And the reason is this. It's decided to adopt this brand new theory, new to the democratic Western world, that giving a public official positive coverage is a bribe. Now, in her opening statement in presenting the case, the chief prosecutor, Liad Ben-Ari, said, well, we agree that this happens all the time, so it can't really be a crime. It's only a crime when there's something particularly sinister or bad about it. And what they're going to try to prove throughout these hundreds of witnesses and all the evidence is that it's not just positive coverage, it's really bad positive coverage, right? I don't know what this might mean, but they've put themselves in a situation where they have to show a lot of extrinsic facts to try to make this theory hang together. And I frankly, there's no there. There's no legal theory that makes any sense here. So ultimately, all that's going to come out of this at the end is the court is either going to have to adopt or not adopt this brand new theory that saying nice things about someone in the media constitutes a bribe.
Ben-Dror, back to you. I want to kind of stay on this. You know, Walla is not a public entity, and it's not uncommon these days for a news company like Fox or even CNN to have an agenda. So theoretically speaking, to what degree is it Elevich's right to dictate the slant or agenda of his company in the first place?
No, it's actually it's even much more than what he said. Meaning that Walla was not. I mean, it's not that they have an agenda in favor of Netanyahu. It's opposite. The opposite. I mean, most time they were against him, and what in all the pressure that has been put on them, actually something very minor came out. I mean, here and there you found a title, here and there you find an article in favor of Netanyahu. But generally speaking, they were not that much different from other websites of the same kind, which mean kind of mainstream. I mean, it's not mainstream because in Israel, when you say mainstream, you mean leaning to the left. That's the meaning of mainstream in Israel. That's one. But I'm trying to do my best in order to distinguish between the legal claims, which I have to say that I don't feel good with them, and my feeling as a human being, as a journalist, as an Israeli citizen, with the general behavior of Netanyahu. So when I distinguish, yes, I say I do not like a prime minister of that kind from one hand, but from the other hand, I have a lot of criticism against the general prosecution with all the process. I mean, because the same media that is against Netanyahu generally exposed so many flaws in the whole process that I am sure about one thing. I'm not sure about fabrication, but I am sure about political motivations in order to indict Benjamin Netanyahu, no doubt about it. And I'm not one of his voters.
So at what point, again, speaking theoretically now, at what point could this have turned into or crossed the line of legality? At what point, does positive spin become illegal? At what point does this bribery situation happen, theoretically speaking?
I mean, sometimes it's just a question of quantity. I mean, but there is not, I mean, and Professor Bell is right because we are not familiar with that kind of felonies. There are no precedents that you can prove, look, he did something which is against the law, because it never happened. It never happened, actually, not in any democratic country. I know that there is a report in Britain, for example, about the issue, but the report is playing to the hands of Netanyahu more than it plays to the hands of the general prosecution. So I'm not sure at all about the legal base that they have. Will they be able to prove that he crossed the red line? I'm not sure, because he will show everyone that actually the confirmation, approval of the Bezek deal was not only according to the law, but he was only the last person to confirm it. So everything right now, it's only the beginning. Maybe, just maybe, we are not familiar with a lot of details that will be exposed later on during the process.
Professor Bell, does this case set a precedent that could be used against other politicians in the future? Or is this sort of a one-off? Because as you said, the court said, don't do this again, but they dismissed the overall objections of the defense.
I think that the prosecution is doing its very best, and I think with great success, to demonstrate that this is only against Netanyahu and not against anyone else. Because if you think about the legal theory that they're pushing here, that coordinated positive coverage constitutes a bribe, there are hundreds of public officials that are guilty of soliciting such bribes in Israel, including members of the prosecution, right? The Attorney General, the former Solicitor General, The other members of the prosecutorial team have definitely been playing the media and seeking support in the media for the official acts that they want to carry out. That is, according to their theory, a bribe. But they've successfully convinced the media, don't worry, we're not going to come after you. And so, in general, the understanding in the media, I think among politicians, is nobody else has to worry. This is a one-time claim of a crime that's only being brought against Netanyahu. And the other people who had arrangements with Noni Moses or with other of the media figures that are in this trial do not have to worry. No charges will ever be brought against them. This is, designed for one person only.
And you're saying that that doesn't hold water exactly?
No, I think it is designed for one person only, and I think that the prosecution has been terribly successful in that. I think it does hold water. The problem is it's illegitimate. There's something wrong with designing criminal law to get one person.
Could you speak a little bit, legally speaking, what does constitute bribery in Israel?
So bribery is not well defined in the law. What it says basically in the law is that giving a bribe is giving something that is called a bribe. The law does not define bribe. Giving a bribe to a public official with the expectation of receiving something. It doesn't make a difference.
That's vague.
That's extremely vague. It does not require that the expectation actually be met. There doesn't have to be a quid pro quo. It's simply giving something with the expectation of getting an official act in return. So, for example, if you give an endorsement to a public official with the idea that they're going to carry out a policy that you like, if an endorsement is a bribe here is the key term, then you're guilty of the crime. Now, the question has always been, what constitutes giving a bribe? What is the thing that is given?
And also, how can you also prove that I was expecting something in return and not just giving the endorsement freely?
Well, in some cases, it's explicit, right? I mean, for example, you have frequently the media discusses giving the so-called etrog treatment, right? The specially protected treatment to politicians who are following a policy that they want. And following a policy in official acts is the kind of expectation that we're talking about. So it's often out in the open. In this case, it has to be demonstrated because Alovich has not said that he openly that he did this with an expectation. But that's not where the key part of the case is. The key part of the case is whether the thing that is being given here, flattering words, right, positive coverage, constitutes a bribe according to the law. The language of the law doesn't tell us. It's the hundreds of years of precedents throughout the Western world that tell us, and they tell us it's not a bribe.
All right, so Ben-Dror, back to you. Oh, yeah.
I'll give you an example. I mean, much before the indictment was published, a very small group of journalists received again and again, same journalist, materials from the investigation. And we all know where did they get it from, because it was only in the head of the prosecutors and maybe of some officials in the police, high-rank officials, high-rank officers. Now, in return, they expected them to speak only in favor of them and against Netanyahu. Now, is it a bribery? According to the definitions that we just heard from Professor Bell, this is a bribery. What does it mean? That Liad Ben-Ari, when she or her colleagues linked the materials, and expected a positive coverage in return, is it bribery? It's becoming ridiculous. So the main point will be, did Netanyahu, and I'm speaking about Netanyahu, did he do something against the law in order to promote something which was out of the law in favor of Shaul Alovich and Bezek and others? I'm not sure that it will be possible to prove it. Pressures, yes. a lot of pressure was exercised in the Walla website in order to receive positive coverage.
So now I want to ask you something else, because I'm curious about another issue. Netanyahu and the Eleviches and many have stated that this case will likely interfere with Netanyahu's abilities to perform his duties as a statesman. If this case is dismissed in the end, and it is found to have materially diminished his ability to operate as the prime minister, does Netanyahu have a case for a countersuit?
It might. I mean, no. I think they have a kind of exemption as long as it was something innocent. But you know what? Everything is possible. Everything is possible. We have no idea. We are only in the very beginning. It might take years until we will know what is going on. It's very destructive. It's very, very destructive. I think that what they are doing is not helping the rule of law. I think what they are doing is destroying the rule of law in Israel. And Professor Bell spoke about more people believe the persecution. No, he was totally wrong, because more people do not believe in the general persecution. And you can see the results of the election. Sure. I mean, from election to election, actually, he is receiving a bit more. Last election, his block was 85. Right now, his block is 89. So I don't think Professor Bell is right. I think it's self-destructive.
Professor Bell?
I think that Ben-Dror is misremembering my comments. I did not say that more people believe the prosecution. Actually, there's some interesting findings on this. Public belief in the honesty and the integrity of the prosecution, of the police, of the prosecutorial lawyers, and even of the courts has dropped dramatically in the last few years. There's a poll that came out last year which showed that only 9% have a high degree of trust in the prosecution. That's just a shocking figure. And so I think that Ben-Dror is absolutely right here, that what you're seeing is an assault on the rule of law by the prosecution, and the public is noticing it. And I don't know how they're going to recover their reputations when all this is over. Whether they win a conviction or whether this case falls apart after dragging it through the media and the courts for several years, either way, the prosecution ends up looking just terrible.
All right.
Yeah, the prosecution is preaching to the choir, but the choir is becoming smaller.
It seems that the choir is starting to turn on the preacher. Yeah. At any rate, thank you so much, Ben-Dror, Yemini, and Professor Avi Bell for joining us. I'm Aaron Porras, and please tune in next time on Insider for more on everything Israel. If there's a topic that you'd like us to cover next, let us know about it in the comment sections online. And finally, for more news from Israel, follow ILTV on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and at ILTV.tv channels. Thank you so much. Be well. We'll see you soon.